Welcome to our show today. I'm Dr. BraVada Garrett-Akinsanya, co-host usually with my Baba Al McFarlane. So we ask you to join us today and just hear at Conversations with Al. On Fridays, we always do this special program. It's called the Healing Circle. And in the Healing Circle, we have a chance to acknowledge the facts of what's going on around us in the environment. And we especially focus on what it means to be healed, how healing can take place, and the issues of today. So today, our topic is going to focus on homelessness. And we're looking at it in terms of abuse in homes, in terms of kids being unsafe on the streets, and also the adults that are responsible for them. And also talking about families that are also homeless. So today we've got that going on, and we have two special guests. And I will go into the protocol. It is called, we'll do the Healing Circle after I introduce our guest. The first one here today is Dr. Lolita King. I would like for her to be able to explain what she does. She is a psychologist within the African American Wellness Institute, which is, you all know, that's where we both work, promoting the spiritual and psychological liberation for African American children and their families. So I'm going to first introduce Dr. King. Welcome, Dr. King.
Thank you so much, Dr. B. It's good to be here again.
You as
I'm
well.
excited to discuss this very important topic today.
Thank you. And so I'd also like to bring to the stage our friend, Angela Reed, who is the executive director of Close Knit. And she's also, I'm just going to brag a little bit, she's one of the board members for the African American Child Wellness Institute. Welcome, Angela. So glad to see you.
I know. I smile every time I see you. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here. So we always enter with a protocol. And the protocol is to create a virtual circle. So what we do is we imagine, even though we're not in the same rooms, that we're in a circle together. And I ask everyone to just take a deep breath and inhale. Exhale. Just inhale once again. Exhale. I invite you to look to your right, assuring your sense of safety. We ask you to look to your left, ensuring a sense of safety. We also want to look behind ourselves, assuring a sense of safety. Now, as you sit there, I invite you to notice the feel of the chair on which you sit that is sturdy and holding you. Notice your feet on the floor, that you're connected and you're present. And in this healing circle, we use it because there is no beginning and no end. There is no hierarchy, for everyone in the circle has equal access to share voice and power and knowledge toward the center of the circle. In the circle, we acknowledge our elders, for those are the shoulders that we stand on, and we are grateful for them. In the circle, we also acknowledge our ancestors, for those were the shoulders that our elders have stood on. And they, our ancestors, are closest to the Creator. So in this space, we continue to work in an orderly manner. We share voice by passing a virtual talking stick from one to another. And if you need the stick, all you have to do is ask if the spirit moves, and you will get the stick to have voice if you really have something you want to share. So with that said, and all that we're going to do today, I'm so grateful that two of the women I most admire in the whole wide world are in this space with me today to talk about our kids, our community, in our healing process. And with that, we say to our elders and our ancestors, Ashe, Ashe. Thank you, Ashe,
Ashe.
Ashe.
Asha.
So now that we're here, I'd like to kind of begin this conversation by asking Angela Reed to tell us more about the work she does, especially with homeless youth, and what she sees as her role in that process. You got the stick, Sister Angela.
All right. Well, you guys know I'm a mother, an advocate, and just a constant learner. And I've always wanted to really focus on improving the communities that we live in. I'm from Minneapolis, born and raised in Minnesota, and I've had an opportunity through my various roles to see how things change, evolve, and where needs are. And so my focus at this organization as executive director of Close Knit is to catalyze systems change. We are really trying to build a holistic model to how they're dealing with homeless youth. So federally, there are 4 recommendations for dealing with homeless youth, which are education, which we hear about, housing, which we hear about, but it's also permanent connections and social emotional support, which really all 4 need to be grounded in order to really have a youth succeed and grow and recover from the experience of youth. We do that by highlighting and doing research to really get the systems to incorporate natural supports. And natural supports are often families who take in other families, where that youth might go the first day they're on the run. The ones we are not able to really calculate, document, find, because they're not linked to a service. And that's really about between 13 and 18,000 youth a night in Minnesota. And so I've had to do dives just to even find the information. So we focus on chosen family hosts, really focusing on those families who are taking in youth, getting youth to talk about the people that they are around. Sometimes they're good for them, sometimes they're not. Really identifying who is good for you and when. And then we have a whole model on how the system needs to incorporate that. So we do it through training, technical assistance. We train providers to implement a curriculum to help identify those needs and address the factors that come from being homeless, and also just the factors of being a youth in Minnesota now. There's just a huge current of pain and trauma and just things that are outside of a lot of the youth's control. And if you don't have a chance to really talk to them about the systematic impacts in their lives, you won't have a chance to really get them to correct themselves. They'll remain in condemnation. So we're doing that through some legislation that we have going, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit more, but we're just trying to grow. And I'm looking forward a lot to really hearing what you guys have to say.
Well, thank you so much, Angela, for sharing that piece of information. I'm interested in coming back and talking to you about the youth, especially when the weather changes, how they do deal with the winters and the cold season, and when it's even extremely hot. So I'll come back to you about that right now. Take the talking stick and pass it to Dr. King and what her issues or interests are around homeless youth and even homeless families. You got the talking stick.
Thank you. So as I think about this topic, I started to try to recall the youth that I've worked with over the years in my role as a psychologist, and those that have faced either short-term or long-term homelessness. And I have to say that I was a little astonished, Miss Angela, to learn that it's 18,000 homeless youth at any given time. That's incredible. And
And that includes like it's 13,000 young adults, about 18,000 young adults and children who are, in the schools through, but 13,000 just, in the streets. So
yeah. And as you mentioned, the factors that fall into them having less access to systems that would support them and get them into a stable situation is tenuous at best. And I really appreciate the idea of those natural supports because it does remind me of how if we're looking at things from an Afrocentric lens, we've
Mhm.
always kind of used our natural supports and family to help mother and parent our children. And when you have a high degree of mental health concerns within the household, maybe a parent, um, uh, or there is abuse,
Mhm.
trauma on behalf of the youth.
Mhm.
Um, those kinds of um, uh, the symptoms and barriers end up further compounding the experiences of our young people,
Mhm.
and they often have a distrust for adults um, because they've been shown by those that are struggling within the family who should be the guardian or head of household that sometimes they can't be that supportive, stable person.
Mhm.
So there's a lack of trust there.
Mhm.
And uh, but we have to consider not only that youth, but the family itself. And how do we get services so that the goal could be, if possible, family reunification.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Let me take this stick from you because I'm really impressed by the idea that our culture as African Americans long ago, some still lingers. We would take care of people's kids.
Hmm.
They call it keeping. I'm keeping your kids. There's
Yeah.
no CPS. There's no
Right.
legal piece of paper, you know.
Right.
And if you're a working mama and somebody like your grandma or your aunt or your cousin, they're keeping your kid for you until you're ready. And what that
Right.
meant to us growing up is that people, if they were, no matter how poor they were, they just make an extra pot of beans, or they would find a way to incorporate into their family everything that they were doing for their own kids, as if their neighbors' kids or their aunts or uncles or cousins were all related. And that is something that I think is missing. The reason I like the word close knit that relates to Angela's program is because we know how to be close. And sometimes when we are not healthy as adults, our proximity to children's lives may not be that good for them. They may, in Project Marua, our parenting program, we often say parents model and teach. So they may be modeling and teaching when you're angry, hit something or somebody. They may be modeling and teaching if you're really, really upset, drink a 2 or 3 beers or a 6 pack, or you're really, really unhappy, go drink, get you a joint somewhere. So sometimes the models aren't healthy themselves. And so that's why I think intervention with kids has to involve not just the child, but who is holding that child. So we don't want to have children have refusal skills and learn how to have better self-esteem. And then we drop them in a cesspool, and I'm using that word on purpose, a cesspool of dysfunction. and
Hmm.
and so for us it's important that all of the people who are in the child's or even the adults who may be home in their circle, they need to be ready and understand what it means to be homeless, or what it means to be on the streets. And one of the first things I think about are the number of Black girls who are missing, and the number of Black girls who are trafficked, and who are seeking somewhere to sleep, and they end up being sexualized. So Angela, I'm going to ask you now, just kind of describe to us some of the kids that come to your program. What are some of their issues? Where do you get them? How do they know to come to Close Knit? So I have 3 or 4 different questions. So I'll start with the first one. Tell us about how do kids find out about close knit? How do you get them?
Well, mostly our connections are through our partners. The partners who work directly with the youth, we want to equip them with the tools to address those situations. If youth contact us directly, which, doesn't happen as often, it's usually like a host, a person who's taking in a youth, because we do resources and guidance, even on navigating what that situation looks like. We have resource guides. We even have like a shared agreement. If you want to talk about, okay, you're going to live here, let's really talk about what that means. What are the legal guidelines? And so we go in that route. Now, ultimately, because this falls under permanent connection, we like to go through the providers as well, because a lot of times it's only the provider who might be the only person in the world who knows where this youth is. And I've been a direct care provider before, and we take our relationships deeper than we're technically allowed to. But we need to be that relationship and dynamic needs to be celebrated, and it also needs to be defined. And so we do, take place in outreach. We make sure when we do see youth, whether it's a quick interaction or we're able to, form a deeper relationship, to go through what we call our circle mapping model, where that is choose your always, sometimes, and maybe person within a visual. Because, if you have a visual, it kind of takes off stress in that time. And so we also have little cards so they can pick that person either in terms of where they want to go that night, but they can also pick that person in terms of what is their goal. Like, what do you need today? They might say, I need to feel hope. Who is your always, sometimes, and maybe person to make you feel like that and make you gain that hope? And then, sometimes your always person needs to be a never person. And it helps to really kind of visualize that. And then we have models, within it to kind of circulate and support that. We are a young organization. We've only been around for 10 years. And as you know, systems change is not easy. And so we're really trying to impact a lot of things on different areas through research and informing and getting just real tools in the hands of providers. And also, because the providers are a permanent connection, we want to focus on the needs of people who are working directly with the clients, especially now, because those dynamics and those relationships and what providers are experiencing, being so boots to the ground and one-on-one within the system of disparities like Minnesota is, just the last 3 years, the providers themselves need a little bit of care and support and to be identified as a permanent connection. So we collect research and share information on the importance of that dynamic as well.
That's wonderful. I think what I like also is the idea of making kids recognize the level of dependability that they have in terms of support. And I think that's a very good starting point with kids and actually adults, because it's sometimes your person who used to be your always becomes your sometimes, because you used up all your always tickets, and you have to kind of get geared down. But I think having that model helps them to kind of encapsulate that they have certain stages or levels of support from whomever, and at least they can recognize that they have support. And most of the time when I see kids, I used to see kids for many years when I was working at another organization. Most people know about it. It was YouthLink, and the kids would be on the streets a long time, and they had a hard time connecting with providers. A lot of them had been sex trafficked, whatever that word is, and they've been abused in so many ways. So they couldn't run back home because that environment was untenable. And then they only had the streets. And in the streets, although they were not at home getting abused there, they were finding other elements of support and abuse in community. So what do you do at Close Knit to address kids who have had those traumatic experiences? And I hear you talk about partners and things like that. What do you do with them when they really don't feel safe on the streets? And of course, they don't feel safe at home. So,
well, I see our organization and the way we really function, which is a really different balance, is we're that organization that's in the gap. We're like that one level of harm reduction where we know that this interaction is going to be hard. as we go through it, because we're the ones, we talk with the ones who are on the waiting list to get into shelters, who cannot get into shelters, who have tried the things that they can try and are really at a state of emergency trying to survive. And so we definitely are very selective about the partners that we refer and share information to, and also the partners that we refer our partners to. They have to have a very good collective with who they're referring them to. And so when we work direct with youth, we want them to leave with tools and something that impacts them immediately. I want to talk about what is going to have you leaving this meeting feeling better. What is that individual thing that's important to you, not what's important to me, not what's important to a guideline or a regulation or what, I'm funded or regulated by. What is important to you? And let's see how we can navigate that together. And so that's the way, we promote the people that we work with to function with youth as well. And then it's one thing about trying to get them quick access to learn about new services. Housing stabilization services are very helpful. Just kind of even giving some guidance and direction, and then staying connected as they go through that process, as they grow, as they, get an apartment, still having a connection with someone. A lot of youth who foster out, because most of the youth actually on the streets are children who fostered out. And so that's why it's that fail safe of this huge system impacts that's been going on in Minnesota. And so
let me interrupt you just for our audience. What do you mean by fostered out?
Like children who have grown out of foster care or have grown out were removed from their home when they were young, have grown out of services and now don't have access to anything.
Or like 18, or is it 18?
Yes. Yep, it could be 18, it could be 16, whatever age that they fostered out or what their independent situation was. And so what they find is that youth the one term I do want to, get in our minds is interdependence. We are taught, our society teaches our culture that you need to be independent by 18. That's unrealistic. And no matter how healthy or much support that you have, my parents still help me with everything to this day if I need it. You got to have support. And so they'll find that youth who end up even getting out of foster care might get into housing. They'll lose their housing because they're not prepared for it. They can't maintain it, or they just get lonely and they will return to that family that's dysfunctional, and they aren't really taught the skills to know about boundaries and how to reinforce them and not to judge and to step back when you need to and to be empowered to do that. And so, like I say, as we grow, I am, looking forward to doing more engagement, more listening sessions, talking to more youth and building this out. It's a really a moving train, a moving soul train. It's a really fine balance supporting these youth who are really at a devastated, state. So you want to link them as quick as you can, but you also want to say we're in this with you because we understand the impacts of the system.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I like to pass the talking stick to Dr. King, just so I hear you. I see you nodding, and I hear you basically physically saying, "Amen, you got it." So tell us a little bit more from your perspective as a clinician, what you see in terms of what Angela just shared with us. And you're muted. Okay, there we go.
Okay. One of the things that struck me was the idea of you having them to identify in your program, having the youth to identify their always, sometimes, and their maybe. And within the context of narrative therapy, I do something along that lines as well, where we're identifying those that can be of support with a person as they go through their journey of healing. And the idea that the always can end up being the sometimes. And Dr. B, you mentioning that perhaps they've kind of used up that resource. And I'm also considering the fact that particularly with youth that have been in experiences throughout their childhood that were traumatic. Um, there has to sometimes be a shift in their expectations, right? So that always person, the person they always go to, never is able to give them what they need. But they say, but that's my mom, or that's my dad, and so the title of that, even though that person is unable at that point in time to be resourced enough to be healthy support, that it takes sometimes for that youth, young adult, to consider that there might be a way of um, accepting that that person can't be your always right now. You know,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean that they didn't want to, but that right now we need to probably consider other people that can walk with you in this part of your journey.
Mhm.
So and it's a grieving process, right? So sometimes the people we love the most and we cling to, it may not be healthy, but it's familiar, right? And
Mhm.
so when you mentioned also, Angela, the idea that sometimes once a homeless youth has acquired an apartment, stable living, they could feel lonely and start to kind of go back to old people, places, and things to feel the sense of community. And that that can be something that if they're not expecting, then that is something that really can derail their stability, or bring it. I'm thinking of a couple of young women that I worked with in the past who ended up losing their housing because the other youth that had not been open to or had access to the services that would have provided stable living come and kind of, that's the crash spot, right? And so
Oh,
then it gets to the point where to me people there breaking the rules and so on and so forth, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that person, the youth that has the housing, but they've opened their heart and their home because they want to help someone else, and it
mhm.
ends up costing them. So
Okay.
it's a lot of psychoeducation. It's about healthy boundaries, as was mentioned, about being okay with saying no or not right now, or setting limits or expectations within your relationships, and really feeling a sense that you deserve this, because that's also another thing that so subconsciously a youth can have been told all along, or they believe based on the circumstances, that I'm not deserving, I'm not good enough. This, uh, it's only gonna it's only gonna end up being bad in the end. So why try? Why, this is only gonna last for so long. So there's so many aspects of the situation that need to be considered, and I love the idea of kind of trying to meet those immediate needs, because as youth you kind of want, you want your reward right now,
That's right.
a lot of adults too, but
Yep.
that's one of the things that, that delayed gratification, and teaching them that it's coming.
Mhm.
The other things can come, but there's steps to it.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Go ahead,
I
Angela.
mean, and it's important to understand that at that age, 18 to 25, you're looking for connection developmentally.
Yes.
I mean, that's just the phase that you're in. And,
Hmm.
what you said, I think was like a perfect little, sub segue into trying to make incremental steps. And so right now I'm working on some legislation that I'm advocating for, and we helped architect, called the Right to House Youth Act.
Mhm.
And what that is it gives 60 days protection to a renter who takes in someone homeless under 25. As long as their landlord knows they got 60 days, but this also lays the groundwork for when you are like in that youth in that situation, kind of has a little bit of a foundation to start that conversation. Like, okay, look, you're here. I notice you're saying you got 60 days. let's talk this through. We have guides depending on what's going on with their situation, guides for their, so if they're involved with criminal justice, if they're pregnant, if they have a disability, there are guides to, kind of help guide them and help those conversations and even to come to agreement together. And that gives a little bit of protection. Taking in family members is what African Americans have done for generations.
That's right.
Absolutely.
As you guys being in the behavioral health field, evidence-based practices need a billable definition. And so that's what Chosen Family Natural Supports follows under that behest. And we have the backup research to prove that. So we've done research with Chaplain Hall University, sponsored by Reich's Foundation, that really is getting our pathway so it's evidence-based and we have more flexibility over what we say our kids need, which I'm hoping eventually will grow to see, the possibilities of it. Because, for instance, if a youth is getting taken away by child protection, if child protection recognized natural supports, another family member should be able to come in and say, give them to me, run my information through your police database, see that there's nothing, give me that child, instead of having to go through this rigmarole that damages them for a year just to be at a place that you can figure out that they are calm. And most families have somebody, but they just need support. You could take in these family and youth, but there's no financial support to do it. They have to stay under the radar. Most of our families are people, it goes deeper because we're not homeowners here in Minnesota or renters.
Right.
So, how do we really navigate that? And the system has to really adjust to natural supports a little bit more. It's more cost effective. And I think the flexibility of that is more prominent now with everything that's going on federally, and you see how things can get locked up, and what option do we have now? It needs to be investing in these families and these children who are doing it. So the perspective of a host and knowing who you are. There are some people I'm an always person to. There are some people I'm a sometimes person to. There's some people I'm a never person to. And it's okay to have those conversations and to lay that out and to let them know. And that's why it's a collective building effort that everybody has to recognize a little kind of piece to it as we go forward in this long haul. And I think it's something that can really make an impact because a lot more people do it than you would imagine. I've been a chosen family host, didn't even know that. But yeah, I've been taking in kids whenever they need it all the time. Yeah. And so we deserve to have some financial backing with that because we are preventing people from being homeless.
Yeah.
Right.
Just give me a second. What was getting me excited is I was thinking about, when you were talking, you remember that show that used to come on with Will Smith? It's called
The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Of Bel-Air. Remember right? Remember in the song he said somebody was making trouble in the neighborhood and he got in trouble and his mama sent him to live with his aunt and uncle in I guess Bel-Air. And so it's so normal. That's normal for us.
Yeah.
It's
and
not an abnormal thing in our parenting to send our kids for somebody else to keep them and watch them. I don't think she did any CPS referral. She didn't require any paperwork. She sent him where he would be safe. So let's talk, as you're talking about these natural support places and people. Sometimes they're not even a person, it could be a place. So one of the things I remember is that when I was working with these kids more heavily than I do now, there was a law that said that they could not get a homeless shelter apartment if they were in school or if within the last 30 days they'd had somewhere to sleep, even if it's not their place, it's on somebody's couch. So we had kids quitting school so that they could have housing. Is that nonsense still going on, Angela?
Well, I have something to say about that as well. So we are located in Minnesota, but we do stuff nationally. We have some connections internationally as well. So there's the National Network for Homeless Youth that is actually working on, and this is where the problem lies that is leading to that, is that there is no federal definition of what homeless actually is. Federal definition of programming is defined by kind of how you bill, basically. And there is no real definition of that would encompass that individual, because they don't get tracked until they kind of get a house. So there's no, so yes, I mean, because they're not technically defining them as homeless. There is legislation going through right now federally to change that definition so that that youth in that situation can get it. Couch hopping youth need to get it. Someone who is unstably housed, someone whose income is too low to meet that need. That's where my role with Homes for All comes in. Homes for All focuses on the continuum of housing, from, you know, those ones who are couch hopping all the way to making sure that there are funds available for buyers, support to get buyers, all that whole spectrum. And that's where we need to really focus our efforts, where everything now is mostly housing centric. We want to complement the system, but absolutely. And then the term too, there's chosen family stranger match, which, you know, we don't, that brings dynamics. We do, but there's stranger match. The one you're talking about is called kinship support networks. So chosen family, kinship networks, and then chosen family host, where it's from, you know, permanent connection relationship that might not be a kinship. But, you know, it's definitely some fun work that I'm doing, but you can see all the problems, and who would be there to advocate for someone like that. Right. There's no system set up to gather that data, to advocate for that need, except for us. Yeah. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Angela, you mentioned something that that I wanted to follow up on also. As we look at, we've been saying culturally, that's kind of what we've done. That's what we've known is the take the children into our homes, or, you know, grandma did that. And, you know, it wasn't uncommon to not actually know that that wasn't really a sister. It's a sister cousin, or what have you, or to be sent down south to live with family because of the fears that the parents may have with, you know, that analogy that you gave, Dr. B, about getting in trouble or wanting to protect and keep them safe. And so sending them to another relative. One of the things that the current model and I would dare to say this Western European based model where it's a nuclear family, and the structure is such as that you take care of the people in your home, and that's it. And then the renters, who may be really open to housing this youth, but it's a matter of, will I lose my housing, you know, and they get penalized for trying to be helpful. So if the legislation can change, and that they can understand that that is not helpful and it's not congruent with our culture and the ways and the practices that make the most sense, then it creates, again, another layer of barrier to that youth's gaining stability. And majority of the time, I mean, it's not by any fault of their own that they were in foster care, or that they felt the need to leave the home, you know, high conflict, or whatever the case may be, having a child, you know, as a teenager. All those factors can play a role, and it's really incumbent on us to, like you said, come up with some legislation that will assist in the natural supports being able to be supported in that endeavor.
And you know, the funny thing is that with it, it's about removing the barriers. Yeah. The way everything is set up, it's created all these barriers where it was something years ago that was natural, took place, like you said, for years. And the whole system creates barriers in every single way. And so it's like dismantling while trying to build.
Yeah. So I named a couple of the barriers. Are there others that you think we should also address in this conversation? And one was, of course, the funding source requiring certain criteria. And now you explained clearly that it was around the definition of who gets in, who doesn't, who's considered homeless, who is not. And then the other piece I think is requiring them to not be in school or not have a job. When I see that if you're homeless, school may be the only safe, reliable, warm, loving place you know. And so if you can go to school and get free lunch and free breakfast, and you're on the streets, and you're even smart enough to do the work, even though you don't have anywhere to study, you can study at study hall, at school, you got teachers encouraging you. What on earth can we do as a community about systems that create barriers instead of breaking them down?
I mean, I think we have to leverage our personal power and connections. And this model and this is something that really carries through for conversation and passion and desire. Mm-hmm. Something that needs to be long-term, ran by the community, because as you know, we participated in so many listening sessions on improving this and that. And that ends up being the project, and there's not anything dedicated to the outcome. Mm-hmm. I think in terms of Minnesota, it's important to think about everything now. And what I would say 5 years ago might be different. But now we're at a state of emergency. So we have to approach it as that. Mm-hmm. You know, you ran that crisis counseling program with FEMA. We are at a state of emergency. And now really since COVID, we've gone through it 3 times. Mm-hmm. We had COVID, we had George Floyd, and now we have the influx of violence within the youth that is creating a whole nother dynamic of community stress that we never have had a chance to even balance off. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so a real uniformed approach, and knowing that until the system does change, we have to be that change. We have to have conversations with our young adults about how hard it is actually to be an adult now, no matter how much support that you have. Relieve that stress, have those conversations on purpose, just in terms of housing, and take time to really talk about 2 kids from a young age. What is your vision on housing when you're 18, 19, especially seniors, even, you know, 12-year-olds, letting them know more about this system, letting them know about the barriers to kind of attack what we have to deal with now and how we're going to prevent it. And then they really need to invest a lot more to understanding the trauma that comes from being homeless. Mm-hmm. A lot of these kids who are homeless now are also had generational experiences. And here in Minnesota now, like I say, might be different 5 years ago. Now we have good 3 generations of people who've experienced trauma and can't get out the cycle, because you got to be 200% the federal median guideline to even get support. There's a big gap where I think most of these people are where we have to do support. So from what I'm learned, we got some work to do, but I think if it is, you know, done by providers who work with the community, it can be done. And just celebrate every win, every person that you interact with, every opportunity, everything has to touch a community is important, and it does make a difference. And that's why our tag is loving youth out of homelessness. Sometimes they just need to feel connected. They don't need to feel lost, and that this is more, you know, it's more of a journey, and that like everything is an accomplishment within it. And we deserve it. I mean, this is our right and how we want our community to be.
Yeah.
But there are barriers to doing it.
Yeah. One of the things I also wanted to bring up in terms of, now that you're talking about advocacy and helping oneself. Recently, there was a group of kids from Brooklyn Park area in Brooklyn Center who went to do a presentation with a bunch of legislators. And the kids were telling the legislators what they need. One of the things that they said, and I know this is true because I hear it from a lot of kids that I see for therapy over the years, they want a safe place to hang out, a safe place. And nowadays, kids in our community, it's so common that kids go to places and they may not be safe, and they'll go to parties. I know a child who's 14 years old. She was 14 and her friend turned 14. So because she was a teenager, they were going to have a teenage party at her house. So at the house, some big kid came rolling up there with a gun, shooting all up the place. And the client that I got, she got shot in the butt running. And so she ended up in the hospital. And I remember on my visit with this family, I was saying, what can we do to help prevent this kind of thing from happening? And then one of them said, this is what's called gallows humor. By African Americans, we tend to laugh things. We laugh instead of crying. But they said, well, what you can learn from that party is you better run faster. And so everybody broke it off laughing. But the reality is, why does a 14-year-old have to go to a party where there's even a gun? So it's such a big systemic problem. And so homelessness is one of the larger variables, because if we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which we've introduced on this program before, first we have physiological safety. And in that, your body needs to be safe, right? You need to have a place where where you're not worried about food or water or nurturing or healthy touch. You're not worried about those things. And if we're struggling as a Black community on this day, in this context, with this president that is making things so topsy-turvy, for we could rely on free lunches 1 month. Then they're going to do federal stopping of free lunches or all the kind of nonsense and rigmarole. It creates a great deal of uncertainty. So in your work, Angela, with our babies who already come from such traumatic, unreliable, uncertain paths, what are you doing, or what can you do? And what can we as a community do? So it's two parts. What are you doing? What can we do to support that stabilization of the youth that you see in your place?
I think there's, always definitely coming together on big level approaches. Being able to stand together and unify as we move forward is definitely a pathway. And I also see another thing that we need to do is just kind of understand where our own personal philosophy and model is on this subject and really start having these conversations. Professionally, I myself do want to one day, if funding shall allow, have a young adult center. They need a place where they can transition into adulthood, where they're given access to this information if they're not able to go to college, and just some guidance to navigate that. Because it's definitely a need. There's so much concentrated disadvantage in Minnesota that I would say the first thing to do is to be dedicated for the long haul. We got some changes to make, and then once those changes are made, as legacy organizations like yourselves, we have to be here to monitor and see that it's maintained to the efficacy that we say, and it has to be done now, because we've been advocating for it in different ways, for years. And so I think just, building more together, getting more resources, more massive public awareness. We know we never get money for media. But we have to be able to connect with our community, and that is a very hard thing to do. And so in terms of, that's why I like to really equip people with tools, handbooks, where if the subject comes up, you can flip through, you got it right there to have those conversations. And it's not really a strain on yourself or on your heart, to completely move forward and, make a personal platform and support other organizations who are working with youth. If you have a knack with youth, no matter what area it is, please get into it, because we're also losing our providers.
Yeah.
We had to look for our next generation of providers to work with this youth. And if you have a knack, that's why a lot of it is no fault of providers either, because when it comes to youth, there just simply is not enough beds. There just isn't, and we got providers who work very hard. This field goes and fights so tremendously, and people who are homeless advocate so loudly. I just spoke at the Homeless Day on the Hill the other day, and there were about, between 800 and 1,000 people there, a lot of them with lived experience of homelessness.
That's right.
And so with me, I'm working on connections, building bridges between chemical health, mental health, homelessness because the foundation is all the same.
Mhm.
Homelessness is an area that can cause SUD and also be an outcome of SUD.
Mhm.
Same thing with mental health. Homelessness can cause mental health, and mental health can be, can cause homelessness. And so as we as legacy organizations reach together, and I'll be reaching out to you. These are the visions I've been doing over in my bubble. We have to just really kind of be targeted. And I think we have the ability. And now more than ever, I am really emphasizing a lot of independence.
Mhm.
Us as a collective, getting together, taking our time, finding a way to have access to what is going to promote this so that we can do it the way it needs to be done and maintain it the way it needs to be done, because federal changes have knocked out, future hope that we might have into things. And so I think it proves the need of grassroots sustainable efforts.
Mhm.
So, we got to kind of keep pushing for it and not be afraid to ask for that money, and always be flexible with the programs that we have. My program now, we have one grant with housing, but everything else is support with donations and foundations. So I had the flexibility to stand strong and hard on, a platform that's not necessarily familiar with Widestream, but has the ability to have the biggest impact. And I think everybody as an organization and individual needs to know that on this issue, we all have the ability to have a very big impact.
Mhm.
Got to focus on it a lot and in a variety of ways. Any way we can. Have a housing policy. What is it, internally as an organization? What resources do you possibly have? Just even becoming familiar with things. So if you have that interaction, you can, do it quickly. A Narcan in your car. So if you see somebody you think they need it, you can give it to them.
Mhm.
Safeties, little kits that you can give to somebody and give them to them, or even collectively coming together to purchase items to make these kits so that we can stay connected, because our community really can be reached. We're 5% of Minnesota population, but we're triple impacted, sometimes quadruply impacted on different things. And that comes from, my actual field is human development, and I'm certified in early childhood education. And so there's a lot of things going on that are outside their control that we understand as developmental people. And we need to keep focusing. So we set that foundation. We take care of that foundation so that they can grow. And right now our foundation is really kind of falling apart.
Shaky, really shaky. So I thank you so much. I think one of the things I'd like to, as you like to do, because our time is almost up actually, but what I'd like to do is have us to think about a vision of what it would look like if our kids and our families had other options readily available and the stigma was gone and they actually were able to get it. And the first thing that hit me a moment ago that made me want to ask this question and put that out there for us was that we need to have creative ways of supporting community. What you just said about having a policy in your office on homelessness, and what do you do, and resources around it. That is so important. I know in my Urban League office, I always kept food. Always, even if it's for peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Because when kids would come to see me who were homeless, a lot of times they were also hungry. And there are barriers professionally that say, oh, you can't give them money, you can't do this for them, you can't do that. But I found ways to donate money to churches that I know will give them money if they need actually cash. So I think I would like to think about which the challenge that's come from this for me today. I'm going to try to think about more ways that I can address those needs that will be legal, ethical, and helpful.
I love that.
I really, 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 really love what you've done for us today, Angela. And Dr. Lolita, I'll give you the talking stick so we can let Angela have the last word. So
Okay, yeah,
you got the talking
sure.
stick.
You mentioned the church, and that's what I was starting to consider. That there were also some things that were happening in the past that went away. And I'm not sure why. I don't even think I was here in the state of Minnesota when the initiative of One Church, One Child was out
Mm.
there, but I do know that Ian Bethel was one of the uh, forerunners in that initiative, and it sounded like it was very effective and helpful. And I think that I'm going to just kind of be curious about what made that work then, what made it go away, what were the barriers, and that did not allow that to continue, and how can we create something such as that that is sustainable, that we don't let
Exactly.
go of. And the fact that the church is still sometimes we have some homeless youth that's just the church's child, right?
Mhm.
And so I think when you say how can we be creative about that, it's just getting me thinking about ways in which I'm already engaged in certain systems or certain social outlets, and church being a big one for me. And
Mhm.
how have we taken on that as one of our charges? That
Mhm.
homelessness is it's multifaceted, and that in order to heal, spiritual healing has a role as well. And so I guess I'm thinking of that. I'm also thinking about, like you said, being creative about food or resources and not being unethical. But we are very intelligent people, very imaginative and creative, and so we can really tackle some of the things that um, we may not have considered, and we're waiting for the big thing to happen. We can do smaller things, more immediate things, I should
Yeah.
say.
Yep.
So I'm excited about just further in that conversation
I love that. Thank
and
you
the
so much.
work. Yeah,
Thank you,
thank
Dr.
you.
King. And
Yeah.
so, Sister Angela, you got 1 minute to say the last word before we drop the mic.
I think the one thing to understand is that this model is a community-driven approach. I can have as much research and even research that's been validated by youth, but the community has to really show that this is something useful and something valuable and something that can be taken in on an individual level, because it's just really the re-inclusion of something that's always taken place naturally. And so, I'm pretty much a homebody. And so I kind of float around and work and kids, and that's it. But please reach out. We are the only intermediary in Minnesota who is focusing on this subject. And so I'm not really one to always go with marketing, but we need support. We need to stay connected. Reach out to me. I love having conversations like this. I love sharing information. I have details and connections within these various fields that I share legislation that other people are promoting other legislation, and that staying connected is the key, in that we have to love these youth right where they're at.
That's right.
Everybody needs an always person. Sometimes a child's person might be their grandma in Tennessee, and if you need some help to get there, we're going to help you get there. And that's how we really have to think about things. So I want everybody just to love youth out of homelessness and realize when you are given that connection, no matter what, big or small, it can make a lifetime of difference in that youth. No matter where you see them, if it's on the street, in the schools, show love and compassion and care and offer resources and guidance.
Where would, if anyone in the public would like to call or email you at CloseKnit, how would they go about doing that? Can you share any information now?
Absolutely. You can email me at ar@closeknit.us. Our website is www.closeknit.us. We have a newsletter with over 1,200 people. Please stay connected with our newsletter. You can always feel free to reach out to me, 651-767-2196. We do train the trainer models. We share our research, and then that way I'll share with you some of the upcoming trainings we'll have with our research. And if you're ever interested in partnering on opportunities or creating something for you that you're working with or developing a new proposal, please feel free to reach out. We're growing, we're flexible. I'm the ED, so we can, flow with the vision that we've laid. My board is awesome. So please, please, please do not hesitate to reach out and share your stories as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Lolita. And thank you, Angela Reed, for bringing this to the forefront. And today, I think that's where we need to drop the mic. Take care and love our babies. See you next time.